Imagine waking up to the aroma of fresh Kona coffee. Not because it's what's in your morning mug, but because the wind carries it directly from where the beans were harvested nearby. As the toasty scent flows in through the window, you recall the festive night you just experienced. The ancestral dances, the storytelling from locals, and the food. Who could forget that food? With visions of smoky pork and sweet pineapple still dancing in your head, you realize it's time to start the day. A guided tour up to the top of the United States of America's highest mountain, and an evening of stargazing are what's on the menu. Today, we're exploring the wonders of Hawaii's Big Island with Rob Taylor. He's the creator of the travel blog Two Travel Dads, and he's here to share his lifetime of experience visiting Hawaii. And I've personally vetted his expertise. Having just returned from my own trip of a lifetime, I can honestly say that Rob can lead you in the right direction when it comes to planning your ultimate Hawaiian vacation. Aloha, fellow travelers, and welcome back to Traveling with AAA. I have been back from Hawaii for less than 24 hours, so I'm a little bit jet lagged, but also brimming with stories to share from my recent trip. I am thrilled to introduce you to today's guest, Rob Taylor, the creator of TwoTravelDads.com and the Two Travel Dads podcast, and the author of two books, The Road Trip Survival Guide and The Ultimate Travel Journal for Kids. Rob, thank you for being here today.
Well, thank you for having me. Mahalo.
When I wanted to go to Hawaii this year, I reached out to you because you've been to all of the islands. You know a lot about Hawaii.
My family goes back to like the 1920s on Oahu. It's a really special place, not just for me, but for my kids too, and my husband. And it's great. It's become a family favorite.
A lot of folks think Hawaii honeymoon or Hawaii destination wedding, but it's really good for families too. We're going to focus on one island, often called the Big Island. It's actually the island of Hawaii. So tell us about this specific island and what is it known for?
The first thing that I always think of is the volcanoes and Hawaii Volcanoes National Park and hiking and lava and stargazing. And then the coffee that comes from the soil that's volcanic. Those are kind of like the two things that really kind of go hand in hand with both visiting as a tourist as well as the agritourism of the island and the agriculture and how the people of the Big Island of Hawaii really thrive and make it a great place for people to visit.
So what can you tell us about the background and the history of the Big Island specifically as it relates to the other islands?
When you think about Hawaiian history, you're talking hundreds, thousands of years of indigenous Hawaiian culture, right? And then colonialism takes place. So much of that took place on the Big Island, whether you are over on the Hilo side or if you're on the Kona coast, you have these different cultural sites, these historic Hawaiian sites where you can learn about the Kingdom of Hawaii and Queen Liliuokalani as the last monarch. You can see these amazing heiaus that are very sacred places for the Hawaiian people. And a lot of it is a part of the national park system now. So it's being well preserved. There's a lot of both anthropological study going along with it, as well as preservation. So that's what I think makes visiting the Big Island so interesting, especially when you're visiting with kids, is you get to see recent Hawaiian history that is not pretty, paired with the actual cultural treasures that still exist and now are being actively preserved in Hawaii. You actually have petroglyphs that you can hike to that are in the lava. There is hundreds of years old of history etched into the lava flows.
That's very exciting to see those out in the wild. What I always loved about Hawaii is it feels very far away, but it is the US. You don't need a passport. Tell us about some of the flight routes if people are thinking, what's the easiest way for me to get there? Where do you fly into?
For us coming from Florida, we always end up flying to Kona first. With every trip, that seems to be our most direct route, is to always start on the Big Island because we've got direct flights from either Los Angeles or Phoenix. Makes it super easy, or Seattle too. But then, you can also fly directly into Maui to Ogigi Kahului or Lihue on Kauai. you don't have to go just directly into Honolulu to be able to launch into a Hawaii trip. And even if like you are up in Anchorage and you want to fly to Hawaii, that's a direct flight and it's easy and it's shorter than all the rest of the flights we can get. So it's very easy to get there from anywhere on the West Coast. And even once you start to go a little bit east into, like I said, to Phoenix, I think even there's direct flights from Dallas and Denver as well. So it's not a difficult destination to get to, although it is going to be often a more costly destination than, say, visiting Southern California for spring break or something like that. But I feel like it's utterly worth it because it's going to be so different than anything else you can experience on the continental US.
Something people don't necessarily know about the Big Island is that you can travel through all but 4 of the world's different climate zones on this one island. You can get everything from wet tropical to desert to polar tundra.
You can actually make an entire day of it just having like an amazing scenic drive where you start on the Kona coast, like in Kailua Kona, and then you drive up and you do the saddle road, which will take you up towards Mauna Kea, which is so extremely tall. My kids will tell you it's the tallest mountain in the United States because they measure it down to the seafloor. And as you drive up Mauna Kea, you are driving through a little bit like prairie, a little bit of lava flow. And then as you start to go up, all of a sudden you have coniferous forest on the island of Hawaii. And then you are in this arid desert type landscape that looks like wine country. And then all of a sudden it is desert and it's just stones and silver swords. And it's incredible. There you are driving through a cloud forest. And then you're in the rainiest city in the United States down in Hilo. Like it's such a diverse daily experience that you can have.
So we did the Summit and Stars tour with Hawaii Forest and Trail. And I think if you're not really a tour person necessarily, you like to DIY your stuff, this is a really good time to let somebody else drive and take the keys for a lot of reasons. It's a bit tricky getting up there. I was just glad to have somebody else driving in this unfamiliar terrain so I could look out the window and enjoy the various levels of passing above the clouds and enjoying it without also having that level of fear and white knuckling. It's quite steep and terrifying. And I also, not all rental cars are allowed to go up there. So keep that in mind. Our guide, his name was Adam, and he was so smart. Total science guy, knew all the stars. I mean, he had a laser pointer. So you go all the way up to the summit. You stay for sunset and a little bit after to experience the colors. And then you come down a couple thousand feet because staying at 14,000 feet for too long, it's not good for you. The air's too thin. So you stay for a little time and then you come down a bit, but you're still above the clouds. So you get to look at all these stars. He's got a telescope. So we're seeing this nebula and that galaxy and things that you've never really noticed before because it's so dark. That was just an incredible astrotourism moment. And I'm so glad we did.
It's spectacular. And if you're going on your own, you can only go so far once it gets dark. So that's one of the great reasons to do one of those tours. As you drive up, there's a couple restrictions for driving. So you can't access everything because there's lots of very fancy telescopes at the top. But as you go up, you are driving up. At one point, it's a 17% grade. And you can feel that feeling of, oh my gosh, my car is going to fall backwards as you're driving. And then if you do want to continue to drive further up the summit, you have to have a 4-wheel drive vehicle because then you've got that steepness and you've got gravel versus a paved road. So visiting Mauna Kea is really neat, but you have to make sure that you have the right vehicle for the full experience if you want to go as far as possible. I think it's a really wonderful place to visit, especially with kids who are into science, because you've got the actual scientists there who are sharing with you what they're looking at out in space. And then you've got the people who are all about the geology of the island, telling you stories about the history of the different flows and the history of Mauna Kea and why it's such a special place. It's incredible. One day we were up at Mauna Kea and, checking out the observatory, the visitor center area, and looking at the sun through this amazing telescope. And then the next morning we got up early to go paddleboarding down in Hilo. And when we looked up, Mauna Kea was covered in snow. It's so cool to be able to see because it's a big island of science, science and history all together. I love it.
It kind of checks all the boxes. In addition to being gorgeous, if you want to like nerd out, you can nerd out all over the place.
Are you into birding?
I'm getting there. It's happening.
Give yourself time. You'll get into it because there are some really cool birds on the Big Island, like the EEV, which is the little red one with the curved beak. And there's some really beautiful types of pheasants. It's really cool.
We could do a whole episode on the birds of Hawaii. But we're talking about the landscape a little bit. Tell us about the Kona coast.
So directly around Kailua Kona, like down towards Captain Cook, that whole slope of the mountain, it starts to go up into the cloud forest where you've got some really cool independent coffee farms and a bit of hippie culture that goes along with that. And then you've also got amazing places for hiking that look out across one of the more rugged coastlines in the islands, in my opinion. One of the coolest places on the Kona coast is hiking up Hualalai Volcano, which is on some private property. And so there's different people who are authorized to take people up there. And you get to go through eucalyptus forests up into these craters and look down over some of the most beautiful, perfectly pure blue Hawaiian water. One of my favorite things about the Kona coast is the presence of snorkeling. There's such good snorkeling. Hapuna Beach State Park is a really amazing place. A lot of people go there. You know, that's where you find like famous Beach 69. Kiholo Bay is one of my favorites. It has wonderful deep water. The lava pours down into it. And then you've got these kind of pits underwater that are just full of fish. It's amazing. And then as you continue down the coast, where you get into the more developed areas like Kailua Kona, there's so many wonderful beach parks that are made for the Hawaiian people to just enjoy and have access to all that. So it's not that resorts have squirreled out all of the best beaches, all of the best snorkeling, because they haven't. It's all very public. There's a few private areas, but for the most part, it's all public access, which is fantastic, especially right in Kailua Kona as you start to head south towards Captain Cook. You are never without a place to get in the water, which is wonderful.
Tell me a little bit about Hilo. Do people need to go there in addition to Kona? I feel like folks are like, Kona is it. Kona's not it. So tell us about Hilo.
It's small. It's quaint. If you know Florida, it's kind of like Ybor City over on the Tampa side. You know, it's got a nice collection of historic buildings as well as actual thriving businesses for the people of Hilo. So it's not necessarily a tourist center, but they've got everything that you can need to visit if you do want to. And what's really interesting about Hilo is the beach access, I think. A lot of people, that's what they're really aiming for when they're going to Hawaii, is getting their beach vacation. Hilo's different. Hilo has beaches, yeah. And they've got some beautiful sand. There's some great surfing in Hilo Bay. It's all wonderful. But then there's these little pockets. There's lots of little springs, like freshwater springs at the edge of Hilo Bay. So there's some small parks where the fresh water flows in and it's absolutely freezing cold. And it mixes with the wonderfully warm tropical salt water. So you get these beautiful places to just kind of chill and relax. And they are full of fish as well. Everything from beautiful like striped sea snakes to small tangs and pyramid butterfly fish, all kinds of cool stuff. It's just right there where you get this interesting phenomena of freshwater and saltwater mixing. So that's all around that part of Hilo. And then as you continue up out of Hilo, you've got your waterfalls and then more beaches. So it's a very different experience than the other side in that it's much less developed for tourism and much more residential side of the island. I really like the Hilo side. If we ever had to move to Hawaii for any reason, I think we'd land in Hilo. Even though it's the rainiest place in the United States, it's also one of my favorite towns and on my list of relocation prospects.
And now for a AAA Travel Minute, protecting your personal data. We're used to protecting our physical belongings while vacationing, but savvy travelers protect their passwords, email, and digital identities too. Safeguarding your personal data starts before you even take off, according to the Center for Internet Security. Update the operating systems on all your devices to take advantage of the latest security patches. Disable settings that automatically connect your devices to open Wi-Fi networks. And be sure to back up important files and photos. While traveling, remember that your personal data is most vulnerable when your laptop connects to open Wi-Fi networks. You'll often find those in hotel lobbies, airport terminals, and at major tourist destinations. In those cases, avoid checking bank balances, making online purchases, and completing other sensitive transactions. Choosing a cell plan that includes data coverage overseas can help avoid some of these pitfalls. Many carriers offer temporary upgrades for traveling customers. A few simple steps can ensure your data is as safe on vacation as your phone or pocketbook. This has been a AAA Travel Minute. Hawaii is known as basically being summer all the time. It's a summer destination. The temperature is fairly consistent year-round. So is there a better time to visit, or is it just always Hawaii time?
A lot of people are choosing, Maui and Oahu as their Hawaii trips. I feel like the Big Island tends to be that third or fourth choice because a lot of people don't understand just how diverse of an experience it is and how it can be such a different sort of vacation. When it's spring break, when it's summer break, most people are going towards all the other islands. So the Big Island is actually great all the time because it is less busy than the other islands. My favorite time to visit is January and February because, that's when even here in Florida, we get some cold weather. And it's really nice to be able to go and get that nice burst or that blast of warmth. So I think that is definitely the best. The other time that's really good to visit is if you can visit in volcano season, which there isn't actually a volcano season. It's just luck. But if you're able to visit or plan a last minute visit while Kilauea or Mauna Loa is erupting, I think that's the other really great time to be able to book, is if you happen to have that flexibility to plan something in one of those natural phenomena time periods.
That's the one thing about the volcanoes is they're unpredictable. You can guess. The scientists have a good guess. There was an earthquake swarm while we were there, and a relatively big one, like a 4.8 the night before we got there. So I was like, oh, it's happening. This could be happening. And it didn't happen while we were there. But so worth it to go and actually see it in real life, right? Because you've seen it.
So what I do to try to get there during volcano season, as I like to call it, is I am on the USGS, the Geological Survey email list. So they send out alerts, and you can sign up for alerts for the Alaskan range. You can sign up for alerts for Hawaii to be informed when the different activity levels change. I travel a lot, so I've got lots of miles that we're always sitting on. If you want to book something last minute using miles, it's actually pretty easy to do because Hawaii is such a planned out travel experience that if there are seats on planes, they let them go for low miles, which is kind of amazing. And maybe that's a secret I shouldn't share, but last minute travel to Hawaii with miles is my hack.
There are 6 volcanoes. I don't think a lot of people know that. I didn't know that. And I am a big volcano aficionado, as you know. So 6 volcanoes, 2 of them are pretty active. A couple of them are dormant and a couple of them are extinct.
Let's start with active because let's face it, that's one of the coolest things to experience. Mauna Loa is the most active volcano, but Kilauea is the easiest to see when there is an active eruption. And the National Park Service is so good about both crowd control and teaching people how to see the lava glow and the lava flows. You've got the entire rim to drive of Kilauea, and there are different viewpoints where you can see the lava very differently. You can always hike on the crater rim trail, and you can get really different views into the Halemaumau crater where most of the lava is coming from. And then for that nighttime experience, you can go into the main areas that, are very easy to access by car, or you can drive to, there's a viewpoint that you have about a mile walk to get to. It's not a hike, it's a walk. And then you literally are in an area that you can look down into one of the most active eruption spots. And it's absolutely incredible. And if you get to see it, then you will be one of the very fortunate few, but it's amazing. And then the other thing that I've gotten lots of questions about over time is being able to see the lava when it actually flows into the sea. Because you've seen those videos and those photos a lot from like the 80s, 90s, early 2000s. Not so much anymore. It hasn't happened in a while, but the Kamakua flow to the sea, that's where the lava literally comes down off the mountain and just pours into the Pacific Ocean. And it's something you can hike to. You can't drive to it. So if it's a really active eruption, unfortunately, unless you're planning to do, I think it's a 2.5 mile hike to get to where that happens, you've got some hiking in the dark to be able to experience it. But what a once in a lifetime experience if that is happening to actually do that.
Can we talk about Chain of Craters Road?
When you come into Hawaii Volcanoes National Park, you need to have your national park pass, or you need to pay the entrance fee because it is a park and the fee goes to maintain it all. You've got the option of either going around the rim in your car, or you can hike it, or you can go down towards Chain of Craters Road, which, I mean, it's exactly as it sounds. It is a road that goes between craters on both sides of the highway. So you'll be going through this beautiful subtropical rainforest, and there's these giant like ferns and all kinds of crazy things like Jurassic Park. And then all of a sudden there is a giant pit next to the road with a trail that you can walk and go all the way around. And there's signs with each pit and crater that says this erupted in 1871, this erupted in 1997, all the way down. And then once you have gone through those craters up on the mountain, you come around to just this sweeping view of the Pacific Ocean. And as you wind down, you can see all of the different lava flows, and they're all slightly different colors. And it's remarkable. That's my favorite word for it. And by the time you get down to the bottom, there's some petroglyphs down there. There is a petroglyph trail that leads you across the lava flows to these carvings. These are hundreds of years old, and they're well documented. There's lots of exhibits, both in the visitor center and down there at the trail, to explain what it is that you are looking at and how people lived in this area among the lava flows. It's really super cool. Chain of Craters is one of the coolest national park drives I've ever done.
It is. And it's not as scary as I was kind of expecting. We drove all the way to the end, and we were listening to, I downloaded an audio guide to kind of take us around. And that was the best thing that I've ever done in a national park, was just having an audio narrator as you drive. It's GPS based. They're like, hey, look to your right. Do you see that rock shaped like a shark's fin? And it was incredible. So I would highly recommend doing that. Well, what they said in the audio guide was this is one of the only national parks you can go to where if you go like once every 10 years, there's a good chance you're going to see new land or something that has completely changed or something different. It's still growing, and the Hawaiian Islands are still growing. So another thing that was actually a big wow for me was the manta ray snorkel that you can do in the Kona coast. I went out with a tour company that wasn't on a big boat. So we paddled out with, I think it's Anelikai Adventures. You get a sort of a traditional double hull canoe that only takes 6 people. So you're not in a big group, super easy. We paddled out, and then you just jump in. And they said we had an above average night. We had 12 to 15 mantas. There were so many of them. They were like bumping into each other. It was absolutely the most spectacular thing. They get so close to you. Obviously, you can't touch them. So I'm just holding my GoPro and backing up. Like, don't touch me. I don't want to hurt you. And oh my gosh, incredible.
I know that you are a shark person. So having spent time in the water with sharks and then having spent time in the water with manta rays, who do you fall more in love with each time, sharks or manta rays? Because I'll tell you, I love sharks too, but mantas have my heart because they're so curious and I don't have an edge of fear with them.
Yeah, you don't have to worry with the mantas. They don't have stingers. They eat plankton. They're not going to bother you. They're just checking things out. They're just eating dinner, and they come up from the bottom, and it's very poetic and slow, and they're just sort of flying around, and you're like, I can't believe I get to see this. And you also can't believe how close it is to the shore, because we stayed at Outrigger and they have a manta viewing deck. And I'm thinking, you can't see the mantas from here. That's crazy. You can every night out on our balcony watching the mantas. So if you are the kind of person who says, I would not get in the dark ocean for any amount of money, I understand. And you can experience the mantas just a little removed from your balcony.
So that's actually how the manta snorkeling began, is that they were shining lights on the water so that guests could see at night just, the beautiful Pacific Ocean that's right there. And then with that, all the plankton was really starting to be like, oh, yes, light. This is so lovely. And then the mantas started to show up. And so the mantas showed up because all the plankton was congregating at the surface there. And then that is how this sort of activity was born. And I'm very careful about the wildlife activities that we do because it's wildlife. It needs to stay wild. Something that's really interesting about manta ray snorkeling specifically is that there isn't a negative human impact on the mantas. So it's not something where they're being touched. They're not being fed by humans. There's already the plankton in the water. All that's happening with the human part of it is that the plankton is just gathering with the light. So sometimes that means that the mantas are 10 feet below you eating, and sometimes it means that you can't move your face because you will get a fin in the face. So it's this really wonderful wildlife experience that allows you to get so close without having a negative impact. And there's lots of wonderful articles that talk about how this is an okay experience, which that's what I had to read a bunch of before we ever did it. Now it's one of our favorite things. Our kids love it. They've got to do it a couple times. The first time was terror for them. They're like, we can't do this. We're out in the dark water. And then once they realized, oh my gosh, look at these manta rays, it crossed off every other fear because it was so remarkable. Oh, so cool.
Let's talk about cultural experiences. Our Hawaiian friends aren't out there having a luau on their own every night. That's not really how it works. But the idea of a luau is that it brings people from all places together, and you can kind of learn a lot about Hawaiian culture in one place at one time while eating absolutely delicious food, right?
The traditional Hawaiian gathering is the paina, and that is going to be that community party, community potluck, where they share music, they share food, local dishes, all that stuff. And that's just part of getting to be Native Hawaiian or, kama'aina. When we're doing a luau, you are getting a bit of that element. You're getting some things that they know that people want to experience, a bit of poi, kalua pork, usually some different Hawaiian-themed cocktails and such. It can depend. But then there's the other side of that where we've done several different luaus, and each one is done very differently. Some are all about the dance and explaining the different moves and what symbolizes what as they are doing the hula. And then we've been to others that pull from different cultures from all across Polynesia. So then you have your fire dancers, you have your hula, you have some different dances that they can show you but not teach you because they're very sacred. There's dances that get everybody else involved. So it's a really interesting cultural experience because you can participate or you can observe. You're not intruding on somebody else's culture. It's something that's being put on for your education and entertainment and as a piece of pride where people can showcase their family history, their ancestral culture. I think luaus are really a unique thing to be able to share with strangers at your table or your own kids. It's really cool.
I agree. And having been going to Hawaii for 20 years, I had never been to a luau. And so I said, this is my time. We went to the one called Legends of Hawaii at the Hilton Waikoloa, and it was lovely. The food was outrageously good. There were Mai Tais a-flowing and all sorts of blue drinks served in really cute glasses, but it had all different dances from areas of Polynesia. And so you got to learn different legends. They had fire dancers. They showed you how to tie sarongs in all different ways, or pareos in all different ways. So it was definitely a learning opportunity in addition to an eating and drinking and family-friendly opportunity. Everybody got up and danced. We really enjoyed it. I thought it was very fun and a great way to learn at the same time as, eating. Always a bonus. We've talked a little bit about kalua pork and a little bit about Kona coffee. Tell us a little bit about the Kona coffee culture.
There are some really specific experiences that you can have. Like Mountain Thunder is a wonderful place that's right there in Kailua Kona, where you go up into the cloud forest and you probably need an umbrella or a poncho. And then you get to walk amongst the coffee trees. You get to see how it is that they're processing and drying and roasting. It's a very small operation. Like the people who are doing it are very tight with their crew and they are happy to share it with you. Another really great Kona coffee place to visit is the Kona Coffee Living History Farm. It's only open a couple days a week, and it is an original coffee plantation. And you can see how the process worked in the early 1900s when coffee farming was beginning on Kona. And you can learn about the culture of the Japanese Americans who were involved with coffee culture as it grew through the 40s and 50s in Hawaii. It's a really cool place. And I actually got to meet a lady there who was doing the interpretation, and she grew up on the little farm. And when she was a little girl, that's where she lived. And she reenacted for us how her mom made lunches in that little tiny rustic kitchen. Like it's a really interesting way to see a different side of that whole Kona coffee culture. And then you go someplace else like Cow Coffee Mill, which is another really wonderful place where you get to see how they roast it and you get to walk through their beautiful trees and orchards of coffee cherries, but then you don't get to fully immerse in each step of it. You get to taste lots of wonderful things, but each place you go is going to present it to you so differently that you can spend maybe not an entire day, because then you would be really hyped up on caffeine by the end of the day. But you can make sure that each day maybe you visit a different coffee plantation or farm or tasting room to get the full spectrum of what Kona coffee and Kona coffee culture really is.
We happened to be there during the Kona Coffee Cultural Festival, which is Hawaii's oldest food festival. And they bring all these coffee farmers together, all these artisans, food trucks, and performers, and they celebrate the culture of Kona coffee. Because it's not just coffee, it's culture that goes with it and the history of it. And the fact that there are like 600 coffee plantations going on right now in this very tiny area. You can only get this coffee at a specific elevation from this specific spot on the island. So it's really amazing that they took a bean from elsewhere and made it their own. And you can only get it here. And it's incredible. It's delicious. But like you said, you can only drink so much or you will run to the top of Mauna Kea at full speed because, it's good, strong stuff. But I really liked the festival. Yeah, know your limits on coffee and caffeine. But it's really fascinating because I think the Kona coffee had such an impact on how that whole region grew, how the island has grown and developed. It's such a great export. And so now anytime you're out and about and you see Kona coffee on the menu, it's kind of exciting because you can know exactly where it came from.
I think agritourism is really an interesting element to visiting the Big Island because it's not just the Kona coffee. It's also there's cacao farms. There is Mauna Loa macadamia nuts is there. So you've got all these large scale and really small mom and pop operations that really like bring you into the farm culture. And it's everything from the Kona Coast to Lavaloha was a really cool farm in Hilo that we went to. And it's all about the coffee and the chocolate. You've got those. You've got the whole Mauna Loa tasting room where you can literally walk around trying every single type of macadamia nut and seasoning that you could possibly want. And then when you go up towards the North Shore, you've got this completely different take on farm culture where it's all about the fruit that's farmed and fresh fruit stands, roadside stands. Like agritourism on the Big Island is a great way to kind of eat your way around the island and support locally and taste all the delicious things.
That is another good point in the food department. Go to the farmers markets. It's all so fresh and it's so good. And when you travel and you eat locally, it changes your whole perspective on food. So that's probably one of my top tips for the Hawaiian Islands is go to the farmers market.
Yeah, and both the Hilo farmers market and the Keao farmers market, like if you're going from Hilo up to the volcano, those are two really wonderful markets that have so much to offer in terms of super duper, both locally grown and really unique baked goods that are very Hawaiian.
itinerary do you think highlights the best of the Big Island, and how much time do you need to see it all?
So I know a lot of people are going to be limited by both time and budget when it comes to planning a trip to the Big Island. If you're able to do island hopping, great. If you can't, I think the Big Island is great for like a 7 or 8 day trip, and then doing it where you've got 3 days based on one side, 3 days based on the other, and then either 2 days up in the north or add an extra day on either side. If you want to, some people love to be in a home base and then go out from there. Whatever you can do, definitely splitting your time between the two sides, both the Kona coast and the Hamakua coast, is the way to make sure that you can experience it all. And I think that 6 days minimum, I mean, you could do it in 4 days, I suppose. But I think 6 days is really ideal because that gives you enough time to really snorkel, to see as many honu as you can, the sea turtles. You get to eat your way from Kona to Hilo. You've got the opportunity to do the volcanoes, both Hawaii Volcanoes National Park, as well as one of the other ones, either Hualalai or going up Mauna Kea. It gives you time to actually do all those different things and not be so rushed that you don't feel like you are vacationing, which it's tricky because I write about this all the time. And my itinerary that I've crafted for the Big Island, it's actually like a 10-day itinerary, to be honest. And I squished it into 7.
I know, because I used it to plan my trip, and all I can think about is going back because there's so much more I want to see and so much more time I want to spend at each place.
There's really cool museums and stuff. So when you're visiting someplace like Hilo, if you've only got 2 days there and you want to see everything, but it's just been dumping rain, go check out the Tsunami Museum, check out the markets. There's different ways that you can still really enjoy places like the rainiest city in the US without compromising on your whole experience. So, I mean, I think approaching your itinerary as knowing that you have limited time and you might not have great weather, so just going through it with everything that you have planned is the only way to operate, especially when you are going out of Hilo. And if you want to hike to Kaka Falls, you probably need to bring an umbrella. Just plan it that way. Don't cancel your plans. Just prepare for them. And I think that's probably the best way to successfully carry out whatever itinerary you go for, whether you're doing it for 4 days or 10 days or 12 days. That sounds even better.
Rob Taylor, thank you for joining us, and thank you to our listeners for being with us. If you're planning a trip, be sure to connect with a AAA travel advisor. Check out AAA.com/travel or visit your local branch. This podcast is a production of Auto Club Enterprises. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and leave us a review. I'm Angie Orth. Thank you for traveling with AAA.